Hi guys, Brett here from Hearns Hobbies, and today I'm going to take a look at continuing the build on this HB Racing D8 WS or World Spec. Now this is the premium nitro 8 scale racing buggy, and in part one it doesn't seem like I got very much done, but building these buggies, it's more than just assembling. I'm not saying that you can't just assemble it, but I did things like I polished the shock shaft and greased up the cartridges, measured the shock lengths, all that sort of stuff, to make sure the shocks were buttery smooth. So effectively we only did 1 page worth of work, and we ended up with these beautiful emulsion shocks. So really nice. I know that Mark's going to be really happy with these. Beautiful dampers. So we'll put those to the side, and let's have a look at the next stage. And the next step is, funnily enough, bag B. And I've got bag B here, and that contains 3 other bags. So let's get it out and see what we've got here. Now I have gone a little bit forward and done a little bit of sneaky work, and I will explain that to you, what I've done and why I've done it, because it's pretty important actually. So I've got the center diff. Sorry, my bags all come open. Actually, we can open these all up, so I like to keep the diff separate and sort of spread them across. So this diff here we'll call the front diff. This diff here we'll call the center diff. You can tell by the spur gear. And the big difference with these diffs and these ones is the difference in the outdrives. So because it runs a disc brake, being a nitro buggy, on the outdrives, it has a more heavy duty outdrive than the diff outdrive on the front and rear, because these are precision lightweight machined, so they've taken material to lower the rotating mass. All done for tenths of a second. Valuable tenths. Have a look at this. We've got our Mod 1 48 tooth pinion there, spur gear there. Got a gasket. It's nice to lay everything out and get organized, make sure we're not missing any parts, because there's nothing worse than getting all greasy and messy and then foraging through a box looking for parts. And this diff over here we will call the rear diff. It's got the crown wheel and pinion in there. Got the 13 to 43 tooth gearbox mesh. Now you'll notice that there's no diff cases in there, and that's because I've opened the kit up and done a little bit of prep work. And I've got a spare one here to show you exactly what I've done. But have a look at these 2 diff housings and see if you can see the difference. So the first difference is the one on this one here has got, you can see this gloss, that is extremely thin CA or super glue. So the reason I do that is just to double check and ensure that that boss has absolutely no imperfections in the case, and it's not going to leak fluid. Gives a little bit of extra strength, and it's something I like to do, just a bit of insurance, because these diffs do get remarkably hot. And if I turn it over, you can see in fact that, see how this surface material here is matte compared to this one's quite glossy. And that is because I have machined it a little bit. I just scuffed it up on the on a sanding stone, just to make sure that make sure that there's no imperfections in the mold. Make sure it's perfectly flat, which will A, give me a really good gear mesh, and B, make sure I've got a perfect seal. And the last piece is, if you look really closely, is there's thread holes in here. These ones are in fact just blank holes, and that's because I've cut a thread in. So it's 3 very important steps that I do, and these will ensure that I have long-lasting diffs, reliable diffs, and they'll be these cases will be rebuildable for many a time, because I usually rebuild my diffs once every outing, every visit to the track. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to show you how I prep it up. First thing I'm going to do is put blue tack in here, and the reason I'm putting blue tack inside the diff is just to make sure that no swarf or debris actually goes in there, because I don't want to get any muck inside the diff case, because we're about to build it, about to fill it with oil and gears. So the next thing I'm going to do is take my Aromax 3mm taper tap, you can see here, and this is used for tapping a thread. It's a taper tap, 3mm, because that's what size the screws are. And I'm going to put it into the diff case and cut the threads. Now the reason that I like to do this is to ensure that the threads are cut and I don't have to use a power tool for assembly, is the first thing. And the second one is you can actually feel when the diff gets tight. And there's another little trick that I did when I used to start doing these diffs, and that was to actually drill a pilot hole all the way through. So it could be just 1 mil, just a very, very small drill bit, all the way through, and that would create a relief in case I overfilled the diff with oil and got diff oil into the screw hole. Because if you get diff oil into this screw hole, it doesn't compress at all with the screw in there, and it does in fact just strip the thread out, it doesn't do up. So the screw won't bottom out, it actually hydraulic locks with the oil. So I've got this all the way in. Now I don't have to go all the way because the screw's only 12mm long, but I like to go all the way in and then unwind it. So you can see that it's obviously quite a little bit of a laborious and tedious job, hence why I didn't do it all on camera. So that's just one hole. Obviously you would go around the cup and do all 4, and that's going to ensure that it's a really nice thread, and you can pretty much do it up with your, so there's no lubrication or anything, get the screw in there and you can just do it up really easily, like so. No power tool needed, and then you'll feel when you're actually doing it up tight. So when you're pulling it up tight, you'll actually feel it because there's no resistance, you're not actually cutting a thread. And it will be a stronger thread as well than one cut by a screw. So that's really good tip there. And then the next thing I do, and that's why I do it all as well without the gears, because you create a little bit of mess on the bench. I start off with a little bit of 240, and I just rub ever so slightly across the sanding stick. Just a little bit at a time. You're not trying to remove a lot of material. Now you can do it on a piece of emery and glass and stuff like that, but I'm just doing it very lightly, rotating it, rubbing it through. Nice circular motion, like so. And that will, just tap that off. And you can tell when it's done because the little casting molds and release. You can see here it's still got a little bit of gloss. See a little bit of gloss there? When it's perfectly flat, it will all be one color. So there's still a little bit of gloss here, so it's still got tiny little high and low spots in it. Then when it's all done, I'll get a bit of 6 or 800, so a lot finer 9-step sanding stick, and just do the same thing and sort of polish it up until we end up with a surface that looks exactly like this one here. So I won't do it now because it does take probably 5 minutes. So it's all nice and flat, it's all one color. This one here still got a little bit of gloss over here. Anyway, so I'll finish that one later. Now the next step I do is the gluing. Like I said, see it's got the little shiny lip of glue there. So the first thing I do is get my kicker It's commonly referred to as kicker. This is super glue accelerator, but it's also really good at being a solvent. So I don't use it to accelerate it, I just use it to make sure that it's perfectly clean and that the super glue gets the best bond. So I'll just spray a little bit. Make sure in a well ventilated area. Like so, just a tiny little, make sure you got a nice clean cloth and wipe it off. And that will ensure that we've got a really nice clean surface. Clean rag. Then I get my super glue and I just put the smallest amount like so. That's it. 3 drops, 4 drops of glue. Put that to the side, put my kicker away, and that is it. And then I will let that dry. Focus. Then I will let that dry naturally. So I don't use the kicker again. Got a nice little pool there of super glue. Just put that to the side and let that dry. But I've got 3 that I've prepared earlier. I'm just going to put this to the side very delicately. Let that one dry. Okay, so that is how I prep up my diff cases. And these are the little bits that take all a little bit of extra time in your build. Okay, so I've got a couple of greases here. XCR O-ring grease and lithium grease. These are fundamentals in my diff assembly. And I will show you why. Where's my 9 steps gizmo? This is right here. A little plastic tool, you would have seen that if you watched the shocks. Put that one in there. Then I'm going to go ahead and get my O-rings. Now it doesn't matter, I can get older O-rings. It's going to save me coming in and out of the grease. Like so. Now the reason that I lubricate the O-rings is in fact to protect it from the silicone grease. It gives a really nice feel, makes it last longer because it's going to be running on metal. So the outdrive goes all the way through. So the O-rings are in there, having a little grease bath, which is fine. Okay, so let's start with the front diff. So the front diff's over here. So start by putting on the cap, put the bearing. Now these outdrives are beautiful, and one thing I really like about them is that HB have put this little recess in it, and that is brilliant for holding grease. So because it runs in the metal boss of the outdrive, if you put that in dry and then put the O-ring on there, that is effectively just running in the dry metal case. So what I like to do is put a little bit of lithium grease, just come back out again, a little bit of lithium grease, just enough to fill that recess up. You don't need to flood it. If you put too much grease in, it will just come out and make a mess. I already make enough mess with the grease as it is. Very tactile, I have to get my hands in there. That one, the center diff. Now the very first nitro buggy I did, I actually put the wrong outdrives in one of the diffs because I didn't realize at the time that they used a different outdrive. But you only make those mistakes once. Okay, and that is it for the grease. So that can get out there before I make a mess. Okay, let's go with the front diff. So put the bearing on the case, Perfecto. Alright, next step is make sure that this drive pin is nice and central in the outdrive, and we can start putting some oil. Now this is going to be the front diff over here, and for the front diff in this setup I am going to put, got my Rubik's World bag here. These are awesome. Got all the oils in here that I could possibly need. I'm gonna get that one, and we'll get that one. These 9 steps pure silicone oil, just beautiful. 20,000 in the front of this bad boy. This is going to run really hot. It's going to be a really gripped up track, and quite the aggressive driver. So I like to put, it's got a security cap, just being tight. $20,000, quite a thick oil by off-road settings, but it's going to be operating in at least 40-degree temperature, and hopefully it's going to do an hour final. So I like to put a little bit of oil, put the first gear in, locate it. Then I'm going to put oil down where the cross pins go. I don't like to remove any material from the diff case if I can help it, where the cross pins are and that, because you want it to be really tight fit. Then we'll go ahead and put our bevels together. So the lower cross pin, got a bevel and a washer, bevel and a washer, like so. Go ahead and put the first one in. Again, locate it with my gizmo, because these pins are actually hard anodized aluminium, so you don't really want to go in there and start scratching that off, because that is a good part of the diff action, is the anodizing. It acts like a nice slick surface for it all to mate on. Okay, another cross pin, bevel, got a bevel, and then the 2 washers. And very rarely do you have to re-shim these, as long as you keep the oil up to them. They actually last for years of use, these HB diffs. Should all press down nice and firm. There we go, we've got the cross pins located. Hold my finger on it, and I'm just going to make sure that it's meshed. Now I don't want to spin it and spin it and spin it, because that's going to introduce a load of air into the diff unit. Just going to put the oil in. Like so. Making sure the most critical part is you do not get any of your silicone diff fluid into your thread holes where you're going to bolt it up, because like I said, that will cause a lot of pain if you strip a thread. Put a little bit on the back of the gear. Now the diff is never 100% full, so I don't mind about not bleeding diffs or putting it in a vacuum chamber, because you never fill it 100%. Diffs don't have a volume compensator like a bladder, so they are effectively emulsion the whole time. So you're doing it full, but that's why you put if you put a little bit, like like every layer of gears, you put another little bit of oil. That will ensure that you have, in fact, got the correct amount in, like so. Now you can leave it sit for half an hour on bleed, but we're going to go ahead and assemble it. So I get the gasket. Actually, we'll build this diff half. So got the crown wheel. We put the outdrive in, again with the grease. Put our O-ring on with the O-ring grease. Get it started by hand. Press it down with the 7mm wheel wrench. We'll put our pin in. Making sure everything remains clean as you go along. Get it all located. Perfect. Now what I've done here is I've lined the gear up so it's up with the cross pins, you know what I mean, like straight between these two bolt holes. Going to put a little bit of a smear of rubber grease on the gasket, and that is just to help me make sure that I've got a really good seal, and also to make sure that the gasket is reusable, because if you don't use a little bit of oil in there, what it can do is it can actually dry out and stick and then tear when you try and do a rebuild, meaning that you always have to put fresh gaskets in. But if you put a little smear of rubber grease on there, it should be fully reusable. So I've got this one lined up. Can go ahead now and make the two halves up, keeping it all nice and straight. And the most important thing now is actually pulling it up nice and evenly. Now I just like to get the screw started, because if you have overfilled the diff, this is when it's going to bleed out and come into your case screws. The oil will go into the screws, again like I mentioned before, causing a hydraulic lock and effectively stripping your thread, leaving you unable to tighten it. So I've got all 4 screws in there. Again, there's no need for power tools, just do it up by hand. Do it across the face of the crown gear. And it should be as easy, hopefully as easy as that. I had a little bit of drama with the drive pin, but that was my own fault for getting a little bit of glue onto the bearing retainer and not noticing. So now it's pulling down. I'm just going to definitely not tighten it, just pull it down so it's all nice and even. And you can feel it. That's what's the beauty about cutting your threads, is you can feel it when it's actually tightening. And then I'm going to rotate it and make sure it's all nice and smooth and everything's meshing, which it is. Typical HB diff, feels amazing. I can go ahead now and again just working myself around the crown gear, applying torque to all the screws, each one just taking 1/8 of a turn. These 9 steps Allen key wrenches are amazing. Really nice knurling, really good finish, feel really good in the hand. Really good tips on them. Give it a wipe over. Again, give it a rotate. Alright. Gonna hold the rag in my hand so I can apply some torque, get this thing done up. Work my way around. Shouldn't need crazy amounts of torque on it. Main thing is that it's nice and even, your gasket surfaces are clean. Last step but not least is going to be writing on it what it is. There you go, there is the front diff. That's 20k. So I'll go ahead here and write 20 on. XX. That is the front diff all done. Now I've got a couple of these washers here. These are for the gearbox shimming, so we won't need these just yet, but I'll put them to the side. We'll put the 20,000 away, make sure we don't get messed up. Center diff time. Got our bearing on. Alright, let's see what we can do. Now, like I said, these have slightly different out drives. Being the center diff. It's going to get this one seated. Exactly the same internals with all the HB diffs, which makes it really nice. Okay, let's see if this diff pin goes in nice and easy. Yep, that's exactly what I expected the first time around. Beautiful. Get the grub screw in. It's usually the second or third diff where I forget the grub screw. Start putting oil in, look down and realise that I've made a mess. Okay, get it in the correct way. Yep, perfect. Go ahead, put a little bit of oil. Centering this car, I'm going 15. Again, the very hot conditions, the very long finals. Making a mess with the oil. Perfectly fine. That's what happens when you squeeze it too hard. Making sure none went down the screw holes. Simple as getting my driver down there, making sure. Perfect. Okay, let's try again. Let's go. Again, impatience. Put a little bit over the drive. The locating pin. Get the first gear in. Just locate it with my finger. It just drops into place. Go ahead and put some oil where the cross pins have got to go. There we go. Second layer of oil. We can start putting the bevel gears in. Now it's really important with your differentials, particularly I suppose the good quality ones, is that after you run the car in, you rebuild the diffs, because you do get a lot of polishing of the gears as they come to mesh. And that's not a bad thing, but you just don't want to be having that in your oil too long. gears meshed. Get a little bit more oil in there. Just work your way around. Don't squeeze it so hard that the tip comes out. Washer on. There we go, the flat side facing down. The pin in nice and square. Get my plastic gizmo tool and put it on down. Making sure that we've got the correct mesh. Beautiful. Go ahead and fill the rest of it up. Usually, like I said, the oils, we don't usually run this heavy. This is for extremely high traction, high temperature. And it's a tuning option. If it's wrong, we'll change it and put lighter oil in. Okay, go ahead. Put the top gear in. Again, get it meshed up. Just rock it into place, get it all seated. Get the cross pin lined up at the top to help me put it together. Move forward with some more oil. There. Nice. I'd say probably 75 to 80% full with diff oil. Then we can go ahead and lubricate the gasket. Get that into situ. Again, making sure the gasket can be reusable. Just a light smear. Try and keep everything lined up. Okay, spur gear. O-ring in. Pre-lubed out drive goes in. Again, the 7mm wheel driver, get that all located and get the pin in. Making sure that the pin is nice and central, everything's nice and smooth. Put the drive pin between the two cross bolts. And we should be good to line everything up. Like so. And then go ahead and get my screws in. Get it all started. Making sure everything feels nice. Here we go. Doing up really nicely. Get them all down and seated. And then we'll check our mesh. Perfect. Nice and smooth. Beautiful. Before we start applying any torque, just work our way around. Give it a bit of a wipe off. Bit of the excess assembly lube on this one from the out drives. Then we'll really torque it down. Okay, there we go, there's the front diff done. So that one we put 15. So I'll get my paint marker out and we will write 15. There we go. They can sit there and rest up. That leaves the center diff remaining. Again, exactly the same processes. Okay, bearing on the cup, out drive in the diff, O-ring in, get that one started. Push it down. Locate the pinhole. Where is my pin? Here it is. Okay, put my bleed screw in before I forget. Make sure it goes in nice and straight. You can actually cut a thread with these as well, with the tap, but there's no real need. Make sure it's not in too much. Perfect, a little bit more. Double check. Beautiful. Okay, so for this one, going 7,000. Again, the 9 steps oil. I'll try not to be too impatient. Burst the lid everywhere. Get some down underneath the first gear. Get that located. Another round of grease down the cross pin. Like so. Then we can start putting our cross pins and bevels on. Here we go, this bevel. There you go, make sure it's all nice and level. Get it meshed up and sitting nice. Another bit of oil. Just layer by layer. Next one. All very straightforward. Well, I suppose it is when you've built a few of them, but I can understand how people get a bit nervous about doing diffs for the first time. Because if you get them wrong, they go very wrong. Okay. Get that one meshed up. Again, not introducing a whole load of air into the oil if I can help it. Another load of oil. Then I'll go ahead, put the top gear in. Again, get it meshed up. Get the pin lined up. Because after I put the next bit of oil in, I don't want to stick my finger in there if I can help it, because make a mess everywhere. Again, you cannot fill the diff up all the way. Probably a good 80%. Like so. Line up my pin and get my gasket ready. So, alright, out drive in, O-ring in, and this will be the last diff done. Just got off to a bit of a shaky start there. Well, a slow start, and then I had a bit of a disaster popping the cap off the oil. Here we go. Get the pin in. Make sure the pin's nice and central. Get it all lined up in the middle of the two holes, and we should be right to drop it straight in. Like so. Get these screws started. Oops. Without losing it everywhere. Can actually use a stand for these. There's one started. Second one. And that is the beauty of, like I said, tapping that thread, is it can really get a good feel of what you're doing and how you're doing it. You can feel if something's crooked or locked up, as opposed to using a power tool. Get these ones down. It wouldn't be the first time that I've had to take the diff up a little bit to realign the gears if I haven't meshed them, but usually because I've rushed through or haven't set the gears up every step of the way. Beautiful. We can go ahead now and get these ones down. Still feels nice. Because if you do happen to do it up crooked, you can definitely damage the casing and the gasket and everything, because everything does up warped, buckled or bowed. Final check. Beautiful. Give it a wipe over and then we'll torque it up. And that is 3 diffs done. Get these ones done up. Just doing them up nice and evenly, working my way around. Making sure they're all even. Perfect. Pretty happy with that. Feels amazing. 7 weight. So I better label this one before we forget what's in there. And then we can call that part 2 done. And we have got the HB coming together. The HB Racing D8 World Spec Nitro Racing Buggy. Apart from the small mistake I made at the very first step, I think the build has been going amazing. 7. Okay. 20, 15 and 7. That's some heavy duty diffs for some heavy duty racing in some really trying conditions. Well, that has been fantastic. So here we have got a set of washers here for the gearbox. Here I have the rear, the center and the front diff. Got the rear shocks. Got the rear shocks and we've got the front shocks. And apart from me making a mess, that has been an awesome first couple of steps. So it looks like we haven't done a lot, but now things will start moving and coming together quickly. So we've got some, these are fundamental, so it's going to handle really well and it's going to be nice and consistent on track. Because if you don't do the diffs right and they leak out or something, they become they become inconsistent and they fail. So if you drive with an overheating diff or a diff that's lost fluid, the car becomes a handful and you usually damage a lot of parts. So the diffs and shocks are really important. Take your time, do the best job you can, go as fast as possible. Well, I'm Brett from Hearns Hobbies, and thanks for joining me in part 2. I'm building the HB Racing D8 World Spec.